prophecy was never about the future. That was the first lie. It was never a forecast, never a glimpse ahead, never a coded announcement of what will be. It was a mirror, a memory, a sacred loop, one that speaks not of what is to come, but of what already came and continues. The prophets were not time travelers. They were pattern readers, dreamwalkers, remembrancers of a language older than history. We think of prophecy as linear. A voice speaks, an event occurs, a truth is confirmed. But time is not linear, and prophecy was never meant to function inside the cage of clocks. It was a spiral, a recognition, an echo. It was the same storm returning not from a distant sky, but from a deeper memory. And so the ancient seers, the real ones, spoke not forward but deeply. They drew their visions from the well of collective memory, not to warn but to remind. The signs they gave were not markers of time, but symbols of repetition, signals that something was reawakening. Because prophecy is not about what will happen, it's about what is happening again. A moment that once tore the veil now returns in new form, different name, same shadow. And if you listen closely, you begin to see that prophecy is not pointing ahead, it's pointing within. It is not a timeline. It is a pattern, a design embedded in myth, in dream, in silence. But humanity forgot. We turned prophecy into theater. We gave it dates. We framed it in fear. We chained it to apocalypse. We turned it into spectacle, something to wait for, to fear, to survive. But prophecy was not given to save you from the future. It was given to wake you from the present, to shake you, to remind you, this already happened. This has been written in your bones. You have heard this story before, and your soul still remembers the ending. Prophecy does not tell time. It reveals the pattern beneath it. And once you see it, you realize something astonishing. You are not waiting for prophecy. You are standing inside it. It's unfolding now, not as a revelation of fate, but as a repetition of memory. The symbols are here. The signs are all around you, not because something is coming, but because something has returned. Prophecy does not speak in sentences. It does not hand you maps or calendars. It does not say, "This will happen next." It dreams. It moves through image, through metaphor, through the unspeakable logic of vision. Because the language of true prophecy is not made of words, it is made of symbols. And symbols do not explain, they awaken. A serpent coiled around a tree, a tower struck by lightning, a woman clothed with the sun, a beast with many heads. You were never meant to understand them. You were meant to feel them, to let them work on you, slowly like fire hidden in the bones. The prophet in ancient times was not a messenger. He was a dreamer, one who dipped beneath the surface of the waking world into the deep current where all stories bleed together. He brought back fragments, not instructions, but riddles. Because truth, when it is old enough, no longer wears a face. It arrives veiled, not to confuse you, but to demand your attention. Symbols pierce the veil of your logic. They bypass the mind and enter the body. They plant something. And days, months, lifetimes later, that seed begins to move. You call it déjà vu. You call it resonance. You call it fate. But it was planted long ago by something you saw, or read, or dreamed. Because prophecy is not a prediction. It's a memory rising in slow motion disguised as something unfamiliar. The dream knows, even when you don't. It speaks to the part of you that never forgot. The part of you that was here the last time the pattern arrived. The part that said nothing, but watched everything. So when the image returns not as prophecy, but as symbol, you recognize it, even if you don't know why. That's why true prophecy feels like haunting, like being followed by something soft but persistent, a whisper in the back of the spine. It isn't showing you what's ahead, it's calling you to remember that you've seen this before. The fall, the flood, the fire, the collapse, the rising. Again and again, like seasons, like breath, like a myth too old to die. But in the modern age, we want facts, we want dates, we want proof. So we kill the dream by trying to dissect it. We smother the symbol with interpretation. And the prophecy, which never belonged to the mind, slips away. But it's still there, in architecture, in story, in archetype. Why do certain myths repeat across cultures? Why do we tell the same stories with different names? Why do the same symbols show up in Sumer, in Egypt, in Vedic hymns, in digital dreams? Because prophecy isn't linear, it's archetypal. It repeats not because it must, but because we have not yet understood the pattern enough to break it. So it returns. And this time it speaks again, not in thunder, but in symbol. In images that slip past the gatekeepers of logic and ask only this: have you seen this before? And somewhere in your bones you answer, yes. We call them seers, prophets, oracles, those who saw what was coming. But that is not what they did. They did not look forward. They looked inward and through. They did not calculate the future. They remembered the echo. Their visions were not forecasts. They were awakenings. The prophet was not a predictor. He was a remembering vessel, a body attuned to the pulse beneath time, to the memory that flows beneath names, nations, and narratives. Because underneath history, beneath every empire, every language, every flag, there is a pattern. And that pattern does not begin, and it does not end. It repeats, like waves, like breath, like stars that spiral through constellations and cycles too vast for calendars. The ancients understood this. They did not see time as a line. They saw it as a rhythm. And the prophet was the drummer, not leading the rhythm but hearing it return before anyone else. What they saw was not new, it was old, so old it felt unfamiliar. They dipped into the deep, into the memory of the world, and returned with fragments. A fire, a flood, a fall, a rising. Always the same bones beneath different skin. And when they spoke not to predict, but to remind, to call people back to something they already knew, but had forgotten. The ancient prophets walked among kings, but they did not serve thrones. They were not aligned with power. They were aligned with truth. And for that, they were feared, exiled, silenced, or turned into monuments. Because a prophet who remembers cannot be controlled, and a people who remember with him cannot be ruled. So prophecy was reshaped. It was made predictive, tamed, bound to dates and outcomes. No longer a mirror, but a script. The prophet was turned into a fortune teller. The memory was buried under dogma, and the echo of cycles was drowned in fear of the unknown. But still beneath all of it, the real voice speaks. Not in timelines, but in tremors. Not in certainties, but in chills. You've felt it, the sense that you've been here before. Not just in this place, but in this moment, this energy, this unfolding. It's because prophecy isn't coming, it's happening, and you are not its audience. You are its carrier. You are the one who remembers what the world worked so hard to forget. That this has all happened before, not as punishment, but as pattern. And when enough people remember, the cycle can shift. Not by worship, not by waiting, but by remembering together what the ancient prophets always knew. We are not moving toward the prophecy. We are waking up inside it. At some point, prophecy was no longer a whisper. It became a weapon. Not a dream, but a decree. Not an invitation to remember, but a command to obey. This was not the doing of the prophets. It was the work of those who feared them. Because prophecy, in its original form, was wild. It was sacred chaos, a signal that the old structures were cracking, that something ancient was returning. But those who built kingdoms on order could not allow chaos to return. So they did what all fearful empires do. They rewrote the dream. They took the memory of the prophets, and they wrapped it in doctrine. They put it in scrolls, then sealed the scrolls behind stone and status. They gave it numbers, chapters, censorship. They turned prophecy into narrative, a straight line from now to then, from warning to punishment, from sin to salvation. No more symbols, no more riddles, just fear. Prophecy became a script, a closed system, a trap disguised as truth. And the people believed it. They waited for signs. They expected doom. They traced headlines like scripture, searching for confirmation that the end was near, never realizing the end was a control device. Because a prophecy written in stone can be used to shape the mind. If you tell a people the future is destruction, they will live in anticipation of it. If you teach them that their role is to endure, not to transform, they will never question the script. And slowly, the future becomes not something unknown, but something rehearsed. It becomes prophecy by performance. The wars foretold, we started them. The disasters expected, we allowed them. The collapse feared, we built toward it step by step, not because it was fate, but because it was familiar. We walked into the prophecy not because it was true, but because we were told we had no choice. The script became reality. But beneath the script, the real dream still lives. The symbols still pulse, quiet and alive, in stories we half remember and images that haunt our myths. There are cracks in the script, moments where you can feel it falter, where something deeper breaks through the page. A dream, a silence, a sudden knowing that none of this is inevitable. Because it isn't. Prophecy was never meant to be a cage. It was a compass. Not to tell you where you must go, but to show you where you already are. The script is only powerful when you believe it cannot be rewritten. But it can. The moment you stop performing the future as they handed it to you, you begin to remember the one that was buried. And in that moment, prophecy becomes possibility again. The question is no longer, what will happen? But what if it already did? And more importantly, what happens now that you remember? We were taught to fear the word revelation, to see it as an ending, a divine explosion, a judgment, a collapse. But revelation was never the end. It was the return, not of destruction, but of memory. It was not prophecy fulfilled. It was prophecy repeating. Because revelation, like all sacred things, moves in cycles. It does not happen once. It spirals over and over again through different cultures, different stories, different names. The same sequence appears. A great forgetting, a fall into illusion, a cry for guidance, the rise of false light, the fracturing of truth, the collapse of systems, the return of the hidden, and finally awakening. Not out there, but in here. Revelation is not the arrival of something new, it is the unveiling of what was always there. The word itself, apocalypsis, does not mean destruction, it means uncovering, a lifting of the veil. And the veil is not over the world, it is over your eyes. We read Revelation as a warning, but it was a mirror, a message in code, not to frighten, but to prepare. Not for the end of days, but for the end of the lie. The lie that the divine is distant, that time is linear, that fate is fixed, that you are powerless. Revelation shatters that illusion. But it must be lived, not interpreted. It is not a chapter in a holy book. It is the season we are now entering again, the moment when the false structures begin to crumble and all that is hidden beneath them begins to rise. The floods, the fire, the shaking, they are metaphors, symbols of inner breakdown, of illusions melting. And what remains? You, your breath, your knowing, your capacity to see not with eyes, but with memory. Revelation is the awakening of ancient memory inside modern noise. It is what happens when the old pattern resurfaces and you recognize it, instead of fearing it. You do not survive revelation. You shed your false self within it. And so, when you see the signs not just in the world, but in yourself, you will know, this is not the end. This is the remembering, not of prophecy fulfilled, but of the original pattern repeating itself. Not to punish, but to invite. Because every time the cycle returns, a choice is given. To fall deeper into the script or to finally awaken from it. To repeat the collapse or to rewrite the rise. That is the real revelation. Not something done to you, but something awakened in you. It doesn't matter what year it is. It doesn't matter how many times it's been ignored. It's happening now, and not for the first time. Because prophecy doesn't happen once. It echoes. And revelation is not a conclusion. It is the crack through which truth enters again. Prophecy was not lost. It was hidden. Not by time, but by intention. Because there were those not gods, but men who knew the power of pattern and feared it. They understood that true prophecy could not be owned, but it could be buried. Not destroyed, but buried under layers of noise. So they wrapped it in story. They shrouded it in fear. They fractured the symbols and scattered them across doctrines, like sacred seeds planted in poisoned soil. They edited the scrolls, redacted the names, twisted the visions into predictions, the reminders into threats, the sacred cycle into a ticking clock. And then they said, "This is what it means. This is how it ends. This is who is saved and who is not." They built systems on that certainty. Empires, priesthoods, calendars. And we inherited a version of prophecy so far from its origin that it no longer resembled what it once was. What had been a mirror became a movie, a spectacle, something to be watched from a distance, something dramatic, inevitable. But it was never meant to be watched. It was meant to be felt, lived, moved through again and again until the pattern was seen, not feared. The signs had always been simple, not predictions, not events. They were fractures in the illusion, moments that broke the script, moments that made you stop and remember, this has all happened before. But when you teach people to fear the signs, they stop listening to them. When you teach them that signs mean doom, they look away. And so the world forgot how to read its own reflection. The serpents were turned to devils. The feminine was turned to sin. The cycles were flattened into Judgment Day. And the memory, the sacred memory of the first prophecy, was locked behind ritual, buried beneath obedience, and kept out of reach by those who benefited from forgetfulness. Because prophecy in its original form is dangerous. It reminds people that they are not waiting for something to come. They are already in it. And if enough people see that, the whole system shakes. Because the system survives on the belief that it knows what's coming, that it owns the future, that it has interpreted the symbols correctly. But prophecy cannot be interpreted. It can only be recognized. Not by scholars, by the soul. And once the soul begins to remember, the script loses its grip. That's why they buried the signs. Because truth, once seen, is irreversible. And prophecy, once remembered, cannot be owned. It spreads, silently, like smoke, like fire, like a dream you've had before, but couldn't name. Until now. You've been taught to wait, to watch the sky, to scan the horizon, to trace ancient words like maps leading to salvation. But the truth was never out there. The prophecy was never separate. It lives beneath your skin. It pulses in your breath. It hides in the ache. You can't name the feeling that something is happening, has always been happening, but no one around you sees it. The real prophets never pointed outward. They pointed inward, to the place where the pattern lives not in scrolls or timelines, but in the body, in the silence, in the remembering. The prophecy is not a script you follow, it's a vibration you carry. It's the chill you get when something repeats, the pause you feel when an image stirs something ancient, the way your soul reacts before your mind can explain. It is not knowledge, it is memory. And the system was built to keep you from it. It taught you to fear that inner knowing, to call it heresy, fantasy, madness. It told you to trust the voice behind the pulpit, not the one that whispers when you're alone at night. But that whisper is the prophecy, not loud, not dramatic, but persistent. It tells you, you've been here before. This has happened. This is not new. And you are not just a witness. You are the fulfillment. Not because of what you do, but because of what you are. You were born carrying the code. You are the echo made flesh, the myth walking again, the mirror holding the pattern. And when you begin to see it, when you stop seeking and start listening, everything changes. The world stops being chaotic. It becomes a conversation, a set of signals, a living prophecy calling itself home through your awareness. You stop asking, when will the prophecy happen? And you begin to ask, what is it asking me to become? Because prophecy was never about predicting disaster. It was about activating you, not to save the world, to remember it, to become the bridge between what was and what could be. The prophecy doesn't want your belief. It wants your attention. It wants your embodiment. It asks, will you live as though you've seen this before? Will you trust the knowing that has no teacher? Will you stop waiting and start being? You don't need a prophet. You are the continuation. You don't need a sign. You are the signal. And the moment you accept that fully, deeply, quietly, the cycle begins to bend. Not because you changed the prophecy, but because you became it. They told you prophecy was about the end, a final moment, a thunderclap, a collapse, written in flame. But that was only the surface. The deeper truth? The prophecy wasn't about the world changing. It was about you. You were not meant to observe it. You were meant to become it. Not someday, not after signs appear, but now, here, in this breath, because the signs already happened, the symbols already returned, the cycle already began. And you are its center. The fulfillment was never a moment in time. It was a moment of awareness. When someone remembers, when the veil tears not in the sky, but in the mind, when the soul opens and the myth re-enters through the self. You were not born to witness prophecy. You were born to embody it. Every archetype, every pattern, every dream vision written in ancient texts, they are not things to look for. They are things to live through. You are the awakening. You are the revelation. You are the apocalypse, not as destruction, but as unveiling. The end was never the point. The unveiling was. And what is unveiled is not wrath, not doom, but truth. Truth that the gods never left. Truth that time is not real. Truth that the ancient stories were never about distant events. They were blueprints for remembering. And now it is remembered through you. That's why the world feels strange, why reality seems thin, why symbols repeat like echoes in your dreams. You are not going crazy. You are waking up. The prophecy was never waiting to happen. It was waiting to be seen. By someone who could read the signs, not with intellect, but with presence. By someone who stopped watching for fire and began to notice the burning within. You are that someone. This is that moment. And the words you've been waiting to hear, they will not come from outside you. They will rise from within. Softly at first, then louder, until your very life speaks them. Until your being becomes the scroll, the vision, the message. You are not part of the prophecy. You are its fulfillment. And the moment you remember that, everything shifts. The cycle completes, the spell breaks, the dream becomes lucid, and the divine which once seemed distant looks back at you through your own eyes and says, "You were never waiting for this. You were always the one meant to deliver it."